The bass hit like a heartbeat you couldn't ignore. The university end-of-year ball was the kind of night that made everyone forget they'd been pulling all-nighters in the library 2 weeks ago. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling of the Great Hall like frozen fireworks, casting gold light across 300 students in rented tuxedos and borrowed dresses. Champagne flutes clinked. Laughter bounced off stone walls. The humidity from all those bodies pressed together turned the air thick and warm, the kind of warmth that sticks to your skin and makes your collar feel like a noose. Jack Calloway loosened his bow tie for the 3rd time and scanned the room. He was looking for Becky, his girlfriend of 14 months. The girl who told him she loved him for the first time on a Tuesday afternoon while they shared a bag of chips on a park bench. The girl who had texted him 3 hours ago saying she'd meet him by the bar at 9. It was now 10:15, and Jack had checked his phone 11 times. He pushed through a group of second-years doing shots and turned toward the back of the hall near the DJ booth, where the lighting was lower and the dancing was looser. That's when his stomach dropped. There she was, Becky Harris, 5'4", brown hair pinned up, wearing the green dress she'd shown him on FaceTime last week, the one she said made her feel like a movie star. And she was kissing someone, not a peck. Not a friendly goodbye. Her hands were on the back of his neck, fingers in his hair, and his arm was wrapped around her waist like he owned her. Jack's brain processed 3 things in order. First, the guy was Rob Mallender, captain of the football team, 6'2", the kind of jaw that looked like it had been carved out of something expensive. Second, this wasn't new. The way their bodies fit together, the casual confidence of the grip, the way Becky tilted her head, this had happened before. Many times. Third, people were watching Jack watch them. That was the part that burned. He could feel the eyes, a cluster of girls near the pillar, whispering behind their hands. 2 blokes from his politics seminar, staring with that horrible half-smile people wear when they're witnessing someone else's car crash. The room didn't stop. The music kept thumping, but Jack's world shrank to a pinhole. Becky pulled away from Rob and turned, maybe sensing the shift in the air, maybe just reaching for her drink. Her eyes found Jack's. Her face went beetroot red. Not the blush of embarrassment, the deep, full-body flush of someone caught in something they can never talk their way out of. Jack, she said his name like it was a question. He stood there. His legs felt like they were filled with wet concrete. Every instinct told him to move, walk away, turn around. But the crowd was thick and the exits were far and the whispers were already spreading like smoke through the hall, and all Jack could think was, everyone in this room knows except me. Rob Mallender had the decency to look uncomfortable for exactly 2 seconds before his face reset to its factory default smugness. "Mate," Rob said, just that. One word, as if that covered it. Jack's fists clenched. He could feel the adrenaline spiking, the primal part of his brain screaming to swing, to do something loud and stupid and satisfying. But Rob had 40 pounds on him and a squad of footballers 3 meters away, and Jack was smart enough to know the difference between brave and idiotic. So he just stood there, burning. That's when the hand touched his arm. It was light. Confident, the kind of touch that says, I know exactly what I'm doing and I need you to trust me for the next 30 seconds. There you are. The voice was warm, slightly amused, completely in control. I've been looking everywhere for you. Jack turned. The girl standing next to him was tall, not just tall, Amazonian, 5'10", maybe 5'11" in heels. Blonde hair that fell past her shoulders in loose waves, the kind that looked effortless but probably took an hour. Turquoise eyes, a white dress that caught the light like silk. She looked like she'd walked out of a perfume commercial and directly into the worst moment of Jack's life. She smiled at him, not at the situation. At him, like he was the only person in the room she wanted to see. Sorry I'm late, she said, loud enough for Becky and Rob and the cluster of onlookers to hear. The taxi was a nightmare. She slipped her arm through his. Shall we get a drink? This champagne tastes like battery acid. Jack had never seen this woman before in his life, but something in her expression, a flicker behind those turquoise eyes, a micro-signal that said play along, made him nod. Yeah, he managed. Let's go. She steered him through the crowd with the ease of someone who had spent her entire life navigating rooms full of people. Her grip on his arm was firm but not forced. She nodded at a few faces as they passed, flashed a smile at a waiter, and within 45 seconds they were through the main doors and into the cool night air of the courtyard. Jack exhaled. It came out shaky. "Okay," she said, releasing his arm and turning to face him. She studied him the way a doctor studies an X-ray. "That looked brutal. You could say that. I'm Sienna Fremont." She extended her hand, firm handshake, direct eye contact. "And I know exactly who Rob Mallender is, so you don't have to explain anything." Jack shook her hand. His brain was still catching up. "Jack Calloway, and I genuinely have no idea what just happened. What happened is I saved you from either punching a footballer in front of 300 witnesses or standing there like a statue while your girlfriend ate another guy's face. Neither option was going to end well for you." She said it with zero cruelty, just facts. "The way a flight attendant tells you to put on your seatbelt. She's not my—" Jack stopped, swallowed. "Yeah, my girlfriend. Not anymore, she's not." Sienna tilted her head. "Come on, I know a place." She took him to a bar called Harlow's, a 15-minute walk from campus. It was the kind of place Jack had walked past 100 times and never entered because the doorman wore a suit and the cocktail menu didn't have prices. Inside, the lighting was amber, the booths were leather, and the music was low enough to actually have a conversation. Sienna was greeted by name. She led him to a corner booth where 3 people were already sitting. 2 women and a man, all roughly Jack's age, all radiating the kind of relaxed confidence that comes from never having worried about a student loan. "Everyone, this is Jack," Sienna announced. "Jack, this is Olivia, Priya, and Marcus, also known as the only people at this university worth knowing." Olivia, dark hair, sharp cheekbones, a glass of red wine, gave a mock salute. "Welcome to the IT crowd, not the show, the concept. We're calling it that now," Marcus said. He was broad-shouldered, mixed-race, wearing a blazer that cost more than Jack's rent. "I thought we agreed on the collective." "That sounds like a cult," Priya said. She had kind eyes and an accent that shifted between London and something South Asian. "Hi, Jack. Sienna rescues strays." "It's her thing." "I don't rescue strays," Sienna said, sliding into the booth. "I collect interesting people. Sit down, Jack." He sat. And for the next hour, something strange happened. Jack forgot about Becky, not completely, not permanently. The image of her kissing Rob was still burned into his retinas like a camera flash. But these people, Sienna's people, were warm. They asked questions. They listened. Marcus turned out to be studying medicine and had a dry sense of humor that caught Jack off guard. Priya was doing a PhD in something to do with climate policy and spoke with the kind of quiet passion that made you lean in. Olivia was blunt, funny, and seemed to have a strong opinion about everything, which Jack found oddly comforting. They didn't mention Becky. They didn't mention the ball. They talked about films and terrible lecturers and a trip to Portugal that Marcus was planning and whether the campus kebab van was a health hazard or a national treasure. Jack had walked in expecting to be pitied. Instead, he was just included. After the second round of drinks, which Sienna paid for without anyone commenting, Jack finally asked, "Why did you do that, back there?" Sienna set down her gin and tonic. The amusement faded from her face, replaced by something harder. "Rob Mallender dated a friend of mine last year, Abigail Danes. They were together for 6 months. He cheated on her with at least 2 other girls, and when she confronted him, he told everyone she was crazy. She transferred to Edinburgh to get away from it." Sienna's jaw tightened. "I've been waiting for an opportunity to embarrass that man in public for a very long time. You just happened to provide one." Jack blinked. "So I was useful. You were convenient." She paused, then the warmth returned. "But you also looked like you needed help, and I don't like watching decent people get humiliated." "How do you know I'm decent?" "I don't." "But you didn't throw a punch and you didn't cry. That puts you ahead of most men I know." Marcus raised his glass. "Cheers to low standards." Everyone laughed, even Jack. It was close to midnight when the door opened and Becky walked in. She'd been crying. Her mascara had run, leaving dark tracks on her cheeks. The green dress was wrinkled. She spotted Jack immediately. The bar wasn't that big and made a beeline for the table. "Jack, please, can we talk? I can explain." The table went quiet. Olivia's eyes narrowed. Marcus looked at his drink. Priya studied the ceiling. Jack looked at Becky. He thought about the park bench, the Tuesday afternoon, the chips. Then he thought about the back of Rob Mallender's head and Becky's fingers in his hair. "No," Jack said, "you can't." "Jack, it wasn't what it—" "Becky." His voice was flat, low, the kind of calm that comes from having already crossed over from heartbreak into something colder. "I saw everything, so did everyone else. We're done." "You're being unfair. Get lost, Becky." The words landed like a slap. Becky's mouth opened, closed. She looked around the table for an ally and found none. Sienna was watching her with the polite, neutral expression of someone observing a wasp stuck in a glass. Becky left. The door closed behind her and the table breathed again. "Well," Olivia said, "that was efficient." Jack picked up his drink. His hand was shaking slightly. But he was smiling. For the first time all night, he was smiling. The next morning, Jack woke up on Marcus's sofa with a headache that felt like a construction project behind his left eye and the vague, disorienting memory of doing tequila shots with Priya at 1 in the morning. He checked his phone. 14 messages from Becky. He deleted them without reading. There was one from an unknown number. "Hope you survived. Coffee later. Sienna." She'd added a time and the name of a cafe near the library. Jack stared at the ceiling of Marcus's flat, which was nicer than any student accommodation he'd ever seen. High ceilings, actual artwork on the walls, a kitchen that had a coffee machine the size of a small car. He showered, borrowed a clean shirt from Marcus, and walked to the cafe. Sienna was already there, sitting by the window with a latte and a copy of the Financial Times folded beside her. She was wearing jeans and a cashmere sweater, no makeup, and she still looked like she belonged on a magazine cover. "You look terrible," she said cheerfully. "I feel worse." He sat down and ordered the strongest coffee the menu offered. They talked. Not about Becky, that subject felt exhausted already, like a fire that had burned itself out overnight. Instead, Sienna asked about his degree, politics and business, final year, his plans after graduation, vague, probably London, maybe corporate something, and where he was from, Suffolk, middle class, nothing special. She shared back. She was also doing politics and business, but in a different stream. Her father, Tom Fremont, was in construction and land development. "The kind of money that doesn't shout," she said, which Jack thought was an interesting thing to say while wearing a sweater that cost more than his laptop. Her mother, Margaret, sat on the boards of 3 charities and hosted dinner parties that ended up in society columns. "So you're rich," Jack said. "Wealthy," Sienna corrected, with a grin that told him she knew exactly how that sounded. "There's a difference, apparently. My mother explained it to me once. Something about old money versus new money versus money. I stopped listening." Jack laughed. He didn't want to like her this much. He was supposed to be heartbroken. He was supposed to be lying in bed listening to sad music and questioning his worth as a human being. Instead, he was sitting in a cafe with the most magnetic person he'd ever met, and she was making him laugh, and the sun was coming through the window, and the coffee was good. Over the next 2 weeks, something shifted. It started with study sessions. They were in overlapping modules: international relations, business strategy, political communication, and Sienna suggested they revise together. Jack said yes because it made practical sense, and also because he was not an idiot. They met in the library, in coffee shops, in the common room of Sienna's college, which had sofas that felt like sitting in a cloud. Sienna was sharp. Not just smart, sharp. She processed information like a blade through paper, cutting straight to the argument's core while Jack was still mapping the edges. She challenged him. He challenged her back. She respected that. "Most people just agree with me," she said once after Jack had dismantled her essay thesis over a pot of tea. "You actually push back. Most people are probably afraid of you." "That's also true." Marcus, Olivia, and Priya folded Jack into their circle without ceremony. Friday nights at Harlow's became a fixture. Jack discovered that Marcus was funnier than anyone that good-looking had a right to be, that Olivia was training for a triathlon and could drink anyone under the table, and that Priya's quiet demeanor hid a competitive streak that emerged violently during pub quizzes. Jack had expected to feel like an outsider among them. He wasn't from money. His dad was a plumber. His mum worked part-time at a veterinary surgery. His idea of a fancy meal was a restaurant where they brought the food to your table instead of you collecting it from a counter. But these people didn't care, or if they did, they hid it well. They included him. They listened when he talked. They didn't flinch when he said he was on a scholarship. One Thursday evening, after a study session that had drifted into wine and takeaway pizza in Sienna's flat, she said something that stopped him cold. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to keep it between us." Jack set down his wine glass. "Okay, I have a boyfriend." The sentence landed strangely. Not like a blow, more like a puzzle piece that didn't fit the picture he'd been assembling. His name is Richard Ashworth. We've been together for about 8 months, and nobody knows, not publicly anyway. Why not? Sienna's expression shifted. The confidence dimmed just slightly, replaced by something rower. Because my father hates his family. It's one of those ridiculous old money grudges. Richard's father outbid my father on a piece of land in Surrey 15 years ago, and my dad has never forgiven it. He considers the Ashworths vulgar. His word, not mine. If he found out I was seeing Richard, he'd lose his mind. Lose his mind how? Cut me off how? Disown me how? My father doesn't do half measures, Jack. She stood and walked to the window. The light was fading outside, turning the sky over the campus from gold to gray. Richard is complicated. He's sweet. He's kind, but he's also terrified of confrontation. His father is the same way about mine, so we hide. We meet in London or at friends' places, or we drive somewhere no one knows us. It's exhausting. Jack watched her. She looked tired for the first time since he'd known her. Smaller somehow. The untouchable, angelic girl from the ball was just a person standing by a window, carrying a secret that was wearing her down. Why are you telling me this? She turned, met his eyes. And there it was, the same micro-signal from the night of the ball, the flicker that said, I need you to trust me. Because I need your help. She laid it out like a business proposal. Her father, Tom, was already suspicious about why she hadn't brought anyone home in months. Her mother kept asking. The family expected her to be dating someone suitable, someone safe, someone they could approve of. I need a cover, Sienna said. Someone my parents can meet, someone presentable, polite, unthreatening. A boyfriend they'll like enough to stop asking questions. You want me to pretend to be your boyfriend? I want us to fake date, publicly, just enough to keep my parents satisfied and give me the space to keep seeing Richard without my father burning everything to the ground. Jack leaned back. His brain ran through the implications. The deception, the lying, the sheer absurdity of it. Why me? Because you're smart. You're charming when you want to be. My parents will love you. You're polite, you're studying the right subject, and you're exactly non-threatening enough that my father won't feel the need to run a background check. Plus, after Becky, you're single. And after what I did for you at the ball, you owe me. She said the last part with a grin. But her eyes were serious. And what do I get out of this? Access. My father knows people in every industry in London. When we graduate, one word from him could open doors that would take you 10 years to find on your own. Jack thought about his dad, the plumber. The early mornings, the bad knees, the quiet pride of honest work. He thought about what his dad would say about this arrangement. Then he thought about London, about the career he wanted, about the gap between where he was and where he wanted to be and how wide it looked from here. Fine, he said. But there are rules, no kissing on the mouth. I'm not performing for an audience, and the moment this gets weird, I walk. Sienna smiled. The full smile, the one that made everything around her seem slightly less important. Deal, they shook hands. And just like that, Jack Calloway became Sienna Fremont's fake boyfriend. He told himself it was a business arrangement, a transaction, mutual benefit. He almost believed it. 3 days after the deal was struck, Becky Harris showed up at Jack's door. He was packing for the end of term. Textbooks in boxes, clothes in bags, the accumulated debris of a final year being sorted into keep and discard. He opened the door expecting a delivery driver and found Becky instead, standing in the corridor with red eyes and a coffee she hadn't touched. Please, she said. 5 minutes. He should have closed the door. He knew that even as he stepped aside and let her in. But there was a part of him, the part that remembered the Tuesday afternoon, the chips, the I love you that still owed her 5 minutes. She sat on the edge of his bed. He stayed standing, leaning against the desk. The room felt too small. It wasn't what you think, Becky began. You were kissing Rob Mallender at the ball, in front of everyone I know. What else would I think? It was a mistake. I was drunk. He was there and you weren't, and I was there, Becky. I was looking for you. She flinched. Her fingers tightened around the coffee cup. I know, and I hate myself for it. I've been hating myself for 2 weeks. I haven't slept. I haven't eaten properly. How long? The question stopped her. She looked at her hands. How long, Becky? Since March. March, 4 months. 4 months of her coming to his flat, sleeping in his bed, telling him about her day, asking about his, all while spending God knows how many hours with Rob Mallender. Jack did the math in his head and felt something harden inside his chest, like wet cement setting. So when you told me you were studying late at the library. Sometimes I was. And the other times. She didn't answer, she didn't have to. Jack exhaled slowly. He looked at the ceiling, then at the boxes on the floor, then at the girl sitting on his bed, and he realized something with perfect, terrible clarity. He didn't feel sad anymore. He'd burned through sadness in the first week. What he felt now was cleaner, sharper. It was the cold, precise feeling of knowing exactly what a person is and accepting it completely. "Here's what I think happened," Jack said. His voice was calm, almost academic. "You got bored. I wasn't exciting enough. Rob was the football captain and he paid attention to you and it felt good. So you kept me as the safe option and him as the fun one, and you figured you could manage both without anyone finding out." Becky's lip trembled. "That's not. And now that it's public, you're here because you've realized Rob doesn't actually want a girlfriend. He wants what he already had, and you're afraid of being alone. Stop. You're not here because you love me, Becky. You're here because I'm the backup plan." She broke. The tears came fast and ugly, the kind that make your whole face crumple. Jack watched her cry and waited for the guilt to arrive. It didn't. "I do love you," she whispered. "I know I messed up, but I love you. You don't get to say that anymore." "Is this because of her, that blonde girl?" "I saw the way she looked at you. This is because of you. This is because you kissed another man in a room full of our friends and let me find out by walking into it. This is because 4 months, Becky, 4 months. He picked up a box of textbooks and set it by the door, a clear signal. "I think you should go. Jack, we're done, I mean it. Don't text me, don't call. Don't show up here again, it's over." Becky stood. Her face was blotchy and wet. She looked at him like she was searching for something, a crack, a softness, a way back in. She found nothing. She left without another word. Jack closed the door, locked it, leaned his back against it and slid down to the floor. He sat there for a long time, not crying, just breathing. The fake relationship started the following week. Sienna orchestrated it like a campaign. Jack was learning, extraordinarily good at managing perception. They were seen together at the right places. The campus coffee shop, the library steps, a pub lunch where she laughed at his jokes loudly enough for the surrounding tables to notice. Within days, the whispers shifted. Jack Calloway, the guy who got publicly cheated on at the ball, was now dating Sienna Fremont. The trajectory was so dramatic that people couldn't help but be impressed. Jack felt the change immediately. Not in how others treated him, though that shifted too. A subtle increase in respect, in eye contact, in the way people said his name, but in how he carried himself. Walking next to Sienna was like standing next to a spotlight. Some of the light inevitably fell on you. She coached him before the big test, meeting her parents. "My father respects 3 things, Sienna said. They were in her flat, and she was ironing a shirt she'd bought him because, quote, his own shirts made him look like a supply teacher. Ambition, directness, and not being intimidated by him. My mother respects manners. Don't try too hard with either of them." The Fremont family home was in Hampshire, a Georgian estate with grounds that went on long enough to have their own weather. Jack's dad could have replumbed the entire east wing and still not earned what the driveway cost. Tom Fremont was exactly as advertised. Tall, broad, silver-haired, handshake like a vice. He looked at Jack the way a jeweler examines a stone, turning him over, checking for flaws, assessing value. They talked about Jack's degree, his plans, his views on interest rates and housing policy. Jack held his own. Tom nodded. That was apparently the highest form of approval. Margaret Fremont was warmer but harder to read. She was elegant, quiet, watchful. She asked Jack about his family, about Suffolk, about what he did for fun. Her questions felt gentle, but Jack noticed she remembered every answer, filing things away. "He's lovely," Margaret told Sienna later, loudly enough for Jack to hear from the next room. "Much better than that awful boy from the rowing club. That was years ago, Mum." "I have a long memory." Weeks passed. The act became routine. Public displays of affection, hand-holding, an arm around her waist, the occasional kiss on the cheek for the benefit of whoever was watching. Jack learned to perform. He was, it turned out, a decent actor, but nights were harder, because 2 or 3 times a week, Sienna would disappear. She'd text him a breezy excuse study group, family thing, early morning, and then she'd be gone. To Richard. Jack knew because she told him casually the way you mention a dentist appointment. "Seeing Richard tonight. Cover for me if Olivia asks?" And Jack would say sure because that was the deal. He told himself it didn't bother him. Meanwhile, something else was happening. Jack started working out, not obsessively, just consistently. The campus gym at 6 in the morning before lectures. Marcus came with him sometimes, teaching him proper form, pushing him harder. Jack's body started changing. His shoulders broadened. His jaw looked sharper. He bought clothes that actually fit. It wasn't for Sienna, that's what he told himself. It was for him. For the person he wanted to become in London. For the future version of Jack Calloway who would walk into a boardroom and belong there. But every time Sienna glanced at him with a flicker of surprise, like she was seeing something new, a small, treacherous part of him kept score. The end of term arrived like a freight train. Finals were 2 weeks away. The pressure was brutal. Jack and Sienna studied together most days, their fake relationship now so convincing that even Marcus and Priya seemed to believe it was real. Only Olivia gave Jack the occasional look that suggested she suspected something, but she never asked. It was a Friday night, the last big house party before revision lockdown. Sienna had been drinking since 7. Jack found her at 11, sitting on the back stairs of a rented house, mascara smudged, phone in her lap. "He canceled," she said. Her voice was flat. "Again. Richard, he was supposed to come to London next weekend. We were going to have 4 days together, 4 real days, and he canceled because his father has some dinner and he can't say no." She looked up at Jack. Her turquoise eyes were glassy with alcohol and something deeper. Frustration, loneliness, the exhaustion of loving someone who would never fight for you. "He's a coward," she said. "I know that, I've always known that, I just keep hoping he'll prove me wrong." Jack sat down beside her. The bass from the party thumped through the wall. "Maybe he will. He won't." She leaned her head on his shoulder. She smelled like gin and perfume. "You would, though." "Would what?" "Fight. If you loved someone, you'd fight for them." Jack said nothing, because the honest answer was yes, and the honest answer felt dangerous. They went back inside, they drank more, the party blurred. At some point they were dancing, and the dancing became closer, and the closeness became something that had its own gravity, and by the time they stumbled back to her flat at 2 in the morning, the line they'd both agreed to respect had already begun to dissolve. She kissed him first. It was in the hallway of her flat, the lights off, the only glow coming from the street lamp outside. She kissed him, and it wasn't performance, and it wasn't strategy, and it wasn't the careful, controlled maneuver of a woman managing a situation. It was need. Raw, clumsy, slightly desperate. And Jack kissed her back because he'd wanted to since the night she took his arm at the ball and led him out of the worst moment of his life. They didn't speak. Words would have introduced logic, and logic would have stopped what was happening. Her hands found the buttons of his shirt. His hands found the zip at the back of her dress. The bedroom was dark and warm, and everything after that was heat and motion, and the sound of breathing, and the strange, overwhelming intimacy of touching someone you've been pretending to touch for weeks. It was intense. Not polished, not the choreographed passion of a film. It was awkward in places, and tender in others, and at one point she laughed against his mouth, and he laughed too, and the laughter became something else entirely. It was two people who had been pretending colliding with something real. Afterward, they lay in the dark, and Sienna's hand rested on his chest, and Jack stared at the ceiling and felt his heart beating against her palm and thought, "I am in serious trouble." Because he knew. He knew with the certainty of someone stepping off a cliff and feeling the air rush up. He was in love with her. Morning came in gray. Not the soft, golden kind of morning that makes everything look gentle and forgiving. The flat, overcast English kind. The kind that turns a bedroom into a courtroom. Jack woke first. His head throbbed. His mouth tasted like something had died in it. He was lying on his back in Sienna's bed, and the sheets smelled like her perfume and last night's gin, and for about 4 seconds before his brain fully powered on, he felt something close to happiness. Then he turned his head and saw her face. Sienna was awake. She was lying on her side watching him, and the expression she wore was not the expression of a woman waking up next to someone she wanted. It was tight, strained, the look of someone calculating damage. "Hey," Jack said. "Hey." She sat up, pulled the sheet around herself. A barrier, the silence lasted too long. "Sienna, that shouldn't have happened." 5 words. Delivered quietly, but with the precision of a surgeon cutting something out. Jack sat up slowly. He looked at her profile, the sharp jawline, the blonde hair falling across her shoulder, the turquoise eyes that were now fixed on the far wall, and he felt the ground beneath him begin to shift. "Okay," he said, carefully. "Do you want to talk about—" "It was a mistake, Jack. I was drunk." I was upset about Richard, and we crossed a line that we specifically agreed we wouldn't cross. You kissed me. I know. Her voice cracked just slightly before she sealed it over again. And I shouldn't have because I'm with Richard, and this what happened, it's cheating. I cheated on him, with you. The irony hit Jack like a cold wave. 6 weeks ago, he'd been the one cheated on. Now he was the other man. I need to tell him, Sienna said. She was already moving, out of bed, pulling on a robe, tying her hair back. Every gesture was a retreat. I need to be honest. Sienna, wait. I can't do this, Jack. I can't look at you right now and think clearly, please. He got dressed in silence. His shirt was on the hallway floor. One of his shoes was in the living room. Every object felt like evidence. At the door, he stopped, turned. It wasn't just the alcohol, he said. Not for me. She stood in the hallway, arms wrapped around herself, and looked at him with an expression that held at least 5 different emotions, none of which she was going to name. I know, she whispered. That's what makes it worse. The door closed. Jack walked back to his flat in last night's clothes, the morning air cold on his neck. Students were already out, heading to the library, to lectures, to the normal rhythms of a normal day. He felt like an alien among them, like he'd crossed into some other frequency overnight and couldn't find his way back. He checked his phone. No messages from Sienna. One from Marcus. You alive? You disappeared last night. He typed back. Alive, barely, talk later. He showered. He ate toast he couldn't taste. He sat at his desk and stared at his revision notes until the words blurred into meaningless shapes. Then he did what he always did when things fell apart. He worked. 4 days passed without contact. Jack threw himself into finals prep with the kind of manic focus that only heartbreak can produce. He studied until his vision swam. He went to the gym at 5 in the morning and ran until his lungs burned. He avoided the places Sienna might be, which was difficult because she was everywhere. The library, the coffee shop, the common room. On the 5th day, Marcus mentioned that the group was getting together at a restaurant near campus. End of exams thing. Sienna's organizing. You should come. Jack hesitated, but refusing would raise questions. And some part of him, the stupid, hopeful part that hadn't learned its lesson, wanted to see her. Wanted to believe that 4 days of silence had been her processing, not retreating. That she'd look at him and something would have shifted. He arrived at 8. The restaurant was Italian, small, candlelit. The kind of place couples go on anniversaries. Marcus and Priya were already at the table. Olivia arrived 2 minutes later with a bottle of wine and a story about a disastrous exam. Sienna came in at 8:30. She was not alone. Richard Ashworth walked in beside her. Tall, lean, dark-haired, with the kind of effortless good looks that came from generations of selective breeding and very expensive dental work. He wore a navy blazer and the easy smile of a man who had never been told no. Sienna's arm was looped through his. She saw Jack immediately. Their eyes met across the restaurant, and for 1 microsecond something passed between them, a flash of guilt, of apology, of please understand, before she reset her expression to polished warmth and guided Richard to the table. Everyone, this is Richard, she said. I've been keeping him a secret and I'm done hiding. Richard, this is everyone. The introductions went around. Richard was charming, polished. He shook hands with the right amount of firmness, said the right things, laughed at the right moments. He was, objectively, a good match for Sienna. Same world, same language, same invisible rulebook. Jack sat through dinner. He ate food he didn't taste. He smiled at jokes he didn't hear. He watched Sienna rest her hand on Richard's knee under the table and felt something inside him die, not dramatically, not with a scream, but quietly, like a candle going out in an empty room. After dinner, on the pavement outside, while the others said goodbye and called taxis, Jack found himself standing near Sienna and Richard. The street was wet. The air smelled like rain and restaurant kitchens. Jack, Richard said, extending his hand again. Great to finally meet you. Sienna talks about you all the time, says you're the smartest person in the cohort. She's being generous, Jack said. His voice was even, controlled. Good to meet you too. Sienna watched this exchange with the careful attention of someone monitoring a controlled explosion. Jack turned to her. He kept his voice low, not angry, not bitter, just honest. If he loved you the way you deserve, he'd tell his father tomorrow. He'd stand in front of your father and say, this is my choice and I'm not apologizing for it. That's what love looks like, Sienna, not hiding. Not canceling trips because Daddy has a dinner party. Sienna's face went very still. Richard, who hadn't heard, was talking to Marcus about cricket. "You don't know him," Sienna said quietly. "I know he's standing right here and you introduced him as a secret you're done hiding, and yet here you are, whispering with me so he can't hear what we're actually saying." Jack met her eyes. "Goodbye, Sienna. Good luck with finals." He walked away, down the wet street past the closed shops and the flickering street lamps, back to his flat where the boxes were packed and the walls were bare and London was waiting. He sat his exams. He scored high. Not because the material came easily, nothing came easily that month, but because he funneled every ounce of frustration, every sleepless night, every image of Sienna and Richard into his revision like fuel into a furnace. Graduation day was warm and bright and full of families with cameras and students in gowns who looked like they were playing dress-up. Jack's parents came. His dad wore a suit that was slightly too tight and looked profoundly uncomfortable. His mum cried because she always cried. Jack searched the crowd once, just once. He saw Sienna across the quad in her gown, standing between Tom and Margaret, smiling for a photograph. Richard was nowhere in sight. She saw him too. She raised her hand half wave, half something else, and Jack nodded in return. A small, clean gesture, acknowledgement without invitation. He loaded his boxes into his dad's van. He hugged his mum. He shook his dad's hand, then hugged him too because his dad looked like he needed it. "Proud of you, son," his dad said, gruff, sincere. "Thanks, Dad." They drove south, toward London. Toward the next thing, Jack didn't look back, but he kept Sienna's number in his phone, not because he planned to call, not because he expected to hear from her, but because some doors, no matter how firmly you close them, never quite latch shut. And Jack Calloway, despite everything, was not done with Sienna Fremont. He just didn't know it yet. 1 year, 12 months of grinding. Jack Calloway had landed in London with a suitcase, a second-class degree that should have been a first, and a studio flat in Clapham that smelled permanently of damp and the Turkish restaurant below. He'd taken a graduate role at a mid-tier consultancy, the kind of firm that looked good on a CV and paid just enough to cover rent, transport, and 1 pint on a Friday if he didn't eat lunch. He was fine, not great. Fine. London had a way of making you feel like you were running on a treadmill someone else controlled the speed of. Everyone around him seemed to be accelerating promotions, networking events, weekend trips to places with names like Verbier and Comporta, while Jack walked to work in shoes that were starting to let in water and ate meal-prepped rice and chicken out of Tupperware at his desk. But he was free. That was the thing he held on to. No arrangements, no performances. No waking up in someone else's life and pretending it fit. It was a Thursday in October. Rain, the proper London kind. Not a drizzle, but a flat, gray curtain that turned the streets into rivers and made everyone walk with their shoulders hunched like they were apologizing for being outside. Jack ducked into a coffee shop near Waterloo, one of those places with exposed brick and filament bulbs that charged £4 for a flat white and acted like they were doing you a favor. He was shaking the rain off his jacket when someone crashed into him. Not a gentle bump, a proper collision. His coffee, which he hadn't even sipped yet, launched out of his hand and exploded across the front of a woman's coat. "Oh," for Jack started. "Oh God, I'm so..." They looked up at the same time. Sienna Fremont. Standing 2 feet away, coffee dripping down the front of a tailored cream coat, her blonde hair shorter than he remembered, a sharp bob that stopped at her jaw, and her turquoise eyes wide with the kind of shock you can't fake. Jack's brain stalled, just completely locked up, like a computer hitting a command it didn't have the software for. "Jack! Sienna!" They stood there. Rain hammering the windows, the barista watching from behind the counter, a puddle of flat white spreading across the floor between them like neutral territory. "Your coat," Jack said, because apparently that was the most important thing his brain could produce. Sienna looked down at the coffee stain, then back at him, and she laughed. Not the polished, social laugh he remembered from dinners with her parents. A real one, surprised and warm and slightly too loud for the room. "Forget the coat," she said. "Jack Calloway in a coffee shop in the rain, you look wet. Different." She tilted her head, that gesture, the same one from the night of the ball. "Good different." They sat down. Jack bought her a replacement coffee and a sparkling water for himself because his budget didn't stretch to 2 coffees in one day, and he wasn't about to explain that. She talked first. Of course she did. Richard and I ended about 4 months after graduation. What happened? Exactly what you said would happen. She stirred her latte, slowly, watching the foam spiral. I told my father. I said this is the man I love and you're going to have to accept it. And Richard, she paused. Richard asked me not to. He said the timing wasn't right, that we should wait until his father retired. And you said. I said if you won't stand next to me now, you never will. She met his eyes. Sound familiar? Jack said nothing, but something in his chest shifted. A door he'd sealed shut 12 months ago, rattling on its hinges. You were right, Sienna said quietly. On that pavement outside the restaurant, everything you said, he was a coward. I just needed to see it for myself. I'm sorry it took that long. Don't be, it was my mess. She leaned back. The confidence was different now, harder, more earned. I'm running for office. What? Parliamentary candidate. The party's been grooming me since I graduated. There's a seat opening in Surrey's safe constituency, by-election expected next spring. She smiled, and there it was again, that magnetic pull, like gravity had personal preferences. Turns out all those years of managing my father's expectations were excellent training for managing a party whip. Jack laughed. He didn't want to, but she was still the most alive person in any room she walked into, and the rain outside made the coffee shop feel small and warm and separate from everything else. They talked for 2 hours. She asked about his job. He was honest, mid-tier firm, decent work, nothing spectacular. She didn't flinch. She didn't offer to fix it. She just listened. At the door, coats on, umbrella wars about to begin, Sienna stopped. Have dinner with me. Sienna, not an arrangement, not a deal, just dinner, 2 old friends. She paused. Unless you're seeing someone. He wasn't. He'd gone on a handful of dates, a lawyer from Hinge who talked exclusively about herself, a teacher from his gym who was lovely but made him feel nothing. Nobody who made the room change temperature when they walked in. Friday, he said. You're buying. Obviously. She stepped into the rain. He watched her go, the sharp coat, the confident stride, the way people on the pavement seemed to move out of her way without being asked. Jack stood in the doorway and thought, don't do this. Then he saved her new number in his phone and walked to the tube. Friday, the Donmer Warehouse. A production of something intense and critically acclaimed that Sienna had booked because she knew people, which was becoming a recurring theme. Jack wore the best shirt he owned. It was still not good enough for the front row, but Sienna didn't seem to notice, or if she did, she didn't care. The play was about power, a couple destroying each other with precision and intelligence. Jack spent half of it watching the stage and the other half watching Sienna's profile in the dark, the way her jaw tightened during the confrontation scenes, the way her fingers gripped the armrest when the lead actress delivered a monologue about choosing ambition over love. After, they walked. The rain had stopped, and London at night was doing that thing where the wet streets reflected all the lights and everything looked like a film set. That was brutal, Jack said. That was honest. Sienna glanced at him. People destroy each other all the time. At least they were doing it with good dialogue. They ended up at a wine bar in Covent Garden, small, candle-lit. The kind of place where the tables were too close together and you had to lean in to hear each other. I need to say something, Sienna said, halfway through the second bottle, and I need you to let me finish before you respond. That's never a good opening. I was terrible to you, at university, the deal, the fake dating, the night she stopped, took a breath. I used you. I told myself it was mutual, that you were getting something out of it too, but the truth is I knew how you felt and I let it happen because it was convenient. And when it got complicated, I chose the easy option, Richard, the familiar thing. Jack looked at his wine, a deep red catching the candlelight. I've thought about that night a lot, she continued. Not just the physical part. The way you looked at me the next morning, like I'd broken something you'd trusted me with, I've never forgotten that. Sienna, let me finish. Her voice was steady, but her hand on the stem of her glass was not. I'm not the same person. I'm not saying I'm fixed. I don't think people get fixed, but I know what I did wrong. And I know that sitting across from you right now is the best I've felt in a year. The silence between them was heavy, not uncomfortable, heavy like a held breath. I'm not going to pretend I'm over it, Jack said. What happened? You chose him. I did. In front of me at that restaurant, you walked in on his arm like the previous night didn't happen. I know. That was the worst part. Not the rejection, the erasure, like I was a draft you deleted. Sienna flinched. A small, controlled flinch, but he caught it. "You're right," she said, "and I can't undo it, but I can be different now if you let me." Jack wanted to say no. The smart part of his brain, the part that remembered the cold morning light and the sound of her door closing, was screaming at him to pay his half of the bill and walk away. But then she reached across the table and put her hand on his. And it was warm and real, and every logical objection he had dissolved like sugar in hot water. They left the wine bar at midnight. The walk to her flat in Kensington took 20 minutes. They covered it in 10. What happened next was not like university. That had been drunken, blurred, tangled up in guilt and confusion. This was deliberate. She opened the door and he kissed her in the hallway, and she pulled him toward the stairs, and every step was a choice. Her coat dropped on the landing. His jacket hit the banister. They didn't make it to the bedroom on the first attempt. The stairs became a temporary compromise, her back against the carpet, his hands bracing on the step above. Laughter dissolving into something deeper, until eventually they moved to the bedroom proper, where things became slower, more focused, and considerably less architectural. He stayed the night. In the morning, the light through her curtains was pale gold. She was already awake, propped on one elbow, watching him. "You're still here," she said. "Did you think I wouldn't be? Last time I woke up and wished you weren't. This time I woke up and checked." He pulled her close. She pressed her face into his neck. They stayed like that for a long time. Two people choosing not to repeat the worst version of themselves. The next 3 months were, by any measure, good. They dated, properly. Restaurants and walks, and Sunday mornings reading newspapers in bed. They argued about politics. She was further right than he was, which produced spectacular debates over breakfast. She met Marcus for a drink and charmed him within 15 minutes. Priya sent Jack a text that said, "She's impressive, be careful." Olivia said nothing, which was its own message. Sienna's political career was accelerating. The by-election in Surrey was confirmed. She was the party's chosen candidate. Meetings, strategy sessions, photo opportunities, donor dinners. Jack watched from the edge of it, proud and slightly dazzled, like standing too close to a bonfire. It was a Tuesday evening, 6 weeks in, when she brought it up. They were cooking, or rather, Jack was cooking, and Sienna was sitting on the counter drinking wine and supervising in her kitchen. "The party wants me to present a certain image," she said, casually. The way someone mentions the weather. "What kind of image?" "Stable, grounded, the kind of woman voters trust with their schools and hospitals." She took a sip. "They think a relationship helps, preferably an engagement." Jack set down the spatula. "An engagement. For the cameras, for the constituency. You know how it works. A single woman running for office is ambitious. A woman with a partner is dedicated. That's incredibly cynical. That's incredibly accurate." She hopped off the counter, walked toward him, put her hands on his chest. "I'm not asking you to pretend. We're together, we're real. I'm just asking you to let people see it publicly, an engagement announcement, a ring, a few photos in the local press. And after the election. After the election, we do whatever we want, but right now I need the party to believe I'm exactly the kind of woman they can sell to Middle England." Jack looked at her, the turquoise eyes, the absolute certainty, the hand on his chest that was warm and steady and impossible to say no to. "You're asking me to be a prop again. I'm asking you to be my partner, publicly. Is that so terrible?" It wasn't. That was the problem, because this time he wasn't pretending. He loved her. And the line between supporting someone and being used by them is only visible from the outside. "Fine," he said, "but I picked the ring." She kissed him hard, and the pasta burned. The engagement made the local papers within a week. Fremont heir and rising star announces engagement to business consultant. The photo was good. Jack in a suit he'd bought on credit, Sienna in a navy dress, both of them smiling on the steps of her constituency office. They looked like a political brochure come to life. Jack's mother called. She was thrilled. His father asked if Sienna's family had a house that needed replumbing, which was his version of a blessing. Then Tom Fremont called. "Dinner," Tom said. "Not a question. Saturday, Hampshire, Margaret's cooking." Margaret was not cooking. Margaret had a private chef named Lewis who produced 5 courses of food that made Jack's meal prep chicken look like a war crime. The Hampshire house was exactly as he remembered Georgian stone, grounds that stretched to the horizon, the quiet authority of generational wealth sitting comfortably on the landscape. Tom waited until the port. Margaret had excused herself. Sienna was taking a call in the other room. Tom poured 2 glasses and pushed one across the table toward Jack. "You've done well," Tom said. "Sienna tells me you're at a consultancy. Good firm." "It's decent. It's beneath you." Tom said it the way he said everything as fact, not opinion. "You're sharp, you think fast, you could be making 4 times your salary in the right environment." "I appreciate that, but George Benson, Chief Operating Officer at Redcliffe Construction, runs the largest infrastructure portfolio in the Southeast. He owes me several favors, and he's looking for someone to run his new Strategic Partnerships division." Tom swirled his port. "I told him about you." Jack felt 2 things simultaneously. The first was excitement, visceral, physical, the thrill of a door swinging open onto something enormous. The second was a cold trickle at the base of his spine, the feeling of a trap being set by someone who'd been doing it longer than you'd been alive. "Tom, I can't just— The interview is Wednesday, Canary Wharf, 9 o'clock. Tom took a sip. "Wear the blue suit, George is old-fashioned." "And if I don't go?" Tom looked at him, not unkindly, but with the patient expression of a man who knew every move on the board. "Then you stay at your consultancy, and you keep eating lunch from a plastic box, and you marry my daughter while earning less than her campaign manager." He paused. "Or you go to the interview and you earn what you're worth and you build something your children will benefit from." Jack wanted to argue. He wanted to say he'd find his own way, that he didn't need the Fremont family hand on his back pushing him through doors he hadn't earned. But Tom was right, and they both knew it. Wednesday, Canary Wharf, 9 o'clock. George Benson was 62, built like a retired boxer, and had the handshake of a man who'd started his career pouring concrete. His office was on the 34th floor. The view was all glass and river and sky. "Tom tells me you're smart," George said, sitting behind a desk the size of a small boat. "Tom's generous." "Tom doesn't do generous, he does strategic." George leaned back. "Tell me what you know about public-private infrastructure partnerships." Jack talked for 40 minutes. He talked about risk allocation models and stakeholder management and the gap between government ambition and delivery capability. He talked about 3 case studies he'd worked on at the consultancy. He talked with the kind of clarity and intensity that only comes from someone who's been hungry for exactly this opportunity. George listened, nodded, made 2 notes on a pad. "Start date is the 1st of next month," George said. "Salary's 120, bonus structure on top, car, private health, the works." Jack blinked. 120,000. His current salary was 38. "I haven't said yes." "You will," George smiled, the same patient smile as Tom. "The people Tom sends me always do." Jack took the job. Of course he took the job. On the train home, watching London blur past the window, he put his earphones in. Gabriella Plynn was singing, and the lyric caught in his chest like a fishhook. "Please don't say you love me because I might not say it back." He loved Sienna. He was almost sure she loved him. But the architecture around them, the engagement, the job, the family was starting to feel less like support and more like scaffolding. The kind you build around something to control its shape. Jack Calloway, the plumber's son from Suffolk, was now earning 6 figures at a company owned by his future father-in-law, engaged to a woman running for Parliament, and living a life that looked from every possible external angle like success. So why did it feel like the walls were getting closer? 3 months into the job, 6 months into the relationship. Jack was sitting in Sienna's living room on a Sunday evening, laptop open, reviewing a contract for a rail depot in Kent, when she walked in and sat on the coffee table directly in front of him. She was wearing his shirt, nothing else. Her hair was still damp from the shower. She smelled like his soap and her perfume and the particular warmth of someone who's been in hot water for a long time. "Close the laptop," she said. "I'm working." "Close it." He closed it. "I want to get married," she said. "Actually married, not the press version, the legal, real, standing in a church version." Jack looked at her. Something in her expression was off. Not wrong, just calculated. The same face she wore before she delivered a speech, preloaded with the right words. "We're already engaged." "We're engaged for the cameras. I want to be engaged for us." She took his hands. "I love you, Jack. I need you to know that before I say the next thing. That's the second worst opening to a conversation I've ever heard. The next thing is this." She squeezed his hands, held his gaze. "I want to marry you because I love you. But I also need to be honest about who I am, because if I'm not, this falls apart later and it's worse." Sienna, what are you? I need freedom, physically. She didn't look away. I love you emotionally. You're my home. You're the person I want to build a life with, but I need variety. Sexually, it's not about you. It's not about us. It's about something in me that I've tried to change and can't. The words landed like stones dropped into still water, one by one, rippling outward. You're asking for an open marriage. I'm asking for honesty. I could lie. I could marry you and sneak around and you'd never know. That's what most people do. I'm choosing to tell you the truth. Jack pulled his hands away, slowly, not in anger. In something worse. You want to sleep with other men while being married to me. I want to be with you in every way that matters. I want your name, your future, your children one day. I just need you to accept that the physical part of me isn't exclusive. It never has been. And Richard, was this what happened with? Richard couldn't handle it. Richard wanted a wife who smiled and baked and pretended to be someone she wasn't. I thought you were different. Different? You're asking me to share you. I'm asking you to love the real me, not the version you've built in your head. Jack stood up, walked to the window. London was lit up below, a million windows in a million buildings, and behind some fraction of them, people were probably having this exact conversation, and he hated all of them. I'm not into sharing, he said. His voice was flat, controlled. The same cold calm he'd found the night he told Becky to get lost. I don't care how you frame it, open marriage, modern arrangement. Whatever language makes it sound civilized. You're asking me to be okay with you in bed with other people, and I'm not. Jack. And the worst part? He turned. You waited until I was in love with you, until I had the ring, the job your father gave me, the flat I can only afford because of the salary he arranged. You waited until I was in deep, and then you told me. Because you knew if you'd said this on day one, I'd have walked. Sienna's face changed, just for a moment, a crack in the armor because he was right and she knew it. That's not, I'm going home, I need to think. Jack, please don't leave like this. We can talk about, I'm not leaving the relationship. I'm leaving the room. There's a difference. But right now, I need to not be looking at you. He picked up his jacket. At the door, he stopped. I love you, he said, without turning around. That's the only reason I'm not walking out for good. The door closed, and Sienna sat on the coffee table in his shirt in the quiet, and she did not cry. She just stared at the closed laptop and the empty chair and waited. 4 days of silence. Jack didn't call. Sienna didn't push. It was the longest they'd gone without speaking since the reunion, and the silence had its own weight pressing down on every hour, filling the gaps between work and sleep with the kind of restless, circular thinking that makes you feel like you're going insane while sitting perfectly still. On Friday evening, his phone rang. Not Sienna, Tom. My study. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. A pause. It's time we talked properly, Jack. The study in the Fremont family home was a room designed to intimidate, dark oak paneling, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a desk that looked like it had been liberated from a Victorian headmaster's office, heavy curtains that kept the natural light at bay, replaced by the warm glow of a green-shaded desk lamp. Tom sat behind the desk. Sienna sat in a leather chair to his left. Neither of them stood when Jack entered. Margaret appeared briefly. She set a tray of tea on the sideboard, gave Jack a look he couldn't quite read, and left. The door clicked shut behind her like a full stop. Sit, Tom said. Jack sat. The chair was lower than Tom's. Deliberately, he suspected. My daughter has told me about your conversation, Tom began. He spoke the way he always spoke, measured, authoritative, as if the words had been drafted by a legal team and approved in advance. And I understand your reaction. It's natural, predictable even. Predictable. You're a traditional young man from a traditional background. The concept Sienna described conflicts with your conditioning. I respect that. Tom folded his hands. But I'm going to ask you to think bigger. Think bigger about my wife sleeping with other men. Think bigger about what a marriage actually is. Tom didn't flinch. A marriage, a real marriage, not the fairy tale, is a partnership. A strategic alliance between two people who are stronger together than apart. It involves compromise, sacrifice, and occasionally the maturity to accept that your partner's needs may differ from your own. Is this the speech you gave Margaret? The room temperature dropped. Sienna inhaled sharply. Tom's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes hardened. Margaret and I have been married for 32 years, Tom said. We have raised a daughter who is about to enter Parliament. We have built a life that most people would consider extraordinary. And yes, our marriage has accommodated flexibility on both sides. He let that land. "You're telling me you see other women," Jack said. "I'm telling you that Margaret and I made a decision decades ago to prioritize the partnership over the fairy tale, and it has worked. We are happy, we are functional, we are a unit." Jack looked at Sienna. She was watching him with an expression that was half hope, half fear. "Sienna is going to be a public figure," Tom continued. "She will be scrutinized, photographed, analyzed. She needs a husband who is stable, presentable, and discreet. In return, that husband will have access to everything this family can offer." "Define everything." Tom reached into his desk drawer and slid a folder across the surface. Jack opened it. Inside was a single typed page. No header, no letterhead, just a list. Joint ownership of the Kensington flat, a country property in the Cotswolds. A seat on the board of Redcliffe Construction within 5 years. Full financial integration, no prenuptial agreement. A household budget that made Jack's current salary look like pocket money. "This isn't a bribe," Tom said. "This is an investment in you, in the family." "It looks like a bribe. It looks like the life you've always wanted." Tom leaned forward. "I've watched you, Jack. Since the first time you sat at my dinner table, you're hungry, you're smart, and you're tired of being the boy from Suffolk who can't quite reach the top shelf. I'm offering you the top shelf, all of it." The silence was suffocating. Jack could hear the clock on the mantelpiece. Tick, tick, tick. He looked at the folder, he looked at Sienna, he looked at Tom, and he thought about his father. The plumber, the 5 a.m. starts, the bad knees, the quiet, dignified exhaustion of a man who'd given everything and never quite gotten ahead. Jack wanted to be noble. He wanted to stand up and say no, say he couldn't be bought, say that some things mattered more than money. But he was 24, and the flat in Clapham smelled like damp. And the woman sitting across from him was brilliant and beautiful and offering him a life that most people only see in magazines. "One condition," Jack said. Tom raised an eyebrow. "If this goes both ways, if she gets her. Freedom, then so do I, same rules, same discretion, no double standard." It was a bluff. Jack had no interest in sleeping with anyone else. But he needed to feel like he had a card in his hand, even if he never planned to play it. Tom looked at Sienna. Sienna looked at Jack. "Agreed," she said. They shook hands, 3 people in a dark room, sealing a deal that felt less like a marriage and more like a merger. The wedding was 6 weeks later, small, elegant, a country church in Hampshire, followed by a reception at the family estate. Jack's parents attended. His mother cried. His father shook Tom's hand and said, "You've got a good lad there," and Tom said, "I know," and both statements were true and both were completely inadequate for what was actually happening. Sienna wore white. Obviously, she looked like she'd been carved out of light. At the altar, she held Jack's hands and said her vows with the conviction of someone who meant every word and also every silence between them. That night, in the bridal suite, she emerged in white lace that left very little to imagination and even less to ambiguity. What followed was intense, consuming, and deliberately overwhelming, the kind of night designed to make a man forget every rational objection he'd raised in the previous week. It worked. Jack lay in the dark afterward, his new wife asleep on his chest, and stared at the ceiling of a room that cost more per night than his old monthly rent. He'd made his choice. Eyes open. Terms accepted. Golden cage, gilded key. Now he just had to live in it. 2 years. That's how long you can run on momentum before gravity catches up. From the outside, Jack and Sienna Calloway Fremont were the couple that made you feel slightly worse about your own life. She won the Surrey by-election by a landslide, youngest female MP in the party, media darling, the face of a new generation of politics. The kind of politician who could be photographed eating a bacon sandwich without it becoming a national incident. Jack climbed the ranks at Redcliffe Construction like the building was on fire, and the exit was at the top. Strategic Partnerships Director by 27. A corner office on the 34th floor with a view of the Thames that made clients sign things faster. They lived in the Kensington flat. 4 bedrooms, original cornicing, a kitchen island the size of a small country. They hosted dinner parties where MPs rubbed shoulders with developers, and everyone drank wine that cost more than Jack's first car. They attended charity galas and premieres and constituency events where they stood side by side and smiled for photographs and looked, to anyone watching, like 2 people who had figured out exactly how life was supposed to work. Jack's mother kept a scrapbook. She cut out every newspaper photo, every magazine mention, every local press clipping about her son and his brilliant wife. Jack found it at Christmas 3 pages dedicated to a feature in the Sunday Times style section, and had to leave the room because his chest felt like it was caving in. Because behind the cornicing and the wine and the photographs, the marriage was a performance, and Jack was getting tired of applause. The arrangement, the agreement, the deal, whatever clinical word made it sound less like what it was, existed in the silences. In the evenings when Sienna came home at 11 and said she'd been at a strategy meeting, and Jack didn't ask where. In the weekends when she went to constituency events that didn't appear on any schedule he could find. In the phone, she kept face down on every surface, and the shower she took the moment she walked through the door, and the way she kissed him hello with the precision of someone ticking a box. Jack told himself it was fine. That was the word he used. Fine. He'd agreed to this. Eyes open. Terms accepted. He had no right to feel sick about something he'd signed up for. But the body knows before the brain admits it. He wasn't sleeping properly. His jaw ached from clenching in his sleep. He started running at 5 in the morning, not for fitness, but because lying next to Sienna in the dark had become unbearable. The trigger was a Tuesday in March. He was at a client dinner. Redcliffe was courting a pension fund for a new development in Reading Glass Towers, mixed use, the kind of project that involved a lot of handshakes and very little concrete. Jack was good at these. He could charm a boardroom the way Sienna could charm a constituency. Different stages, same skill. Across the table sat a man named David Holt. Mid-50s, hedge fund, the permanent tan of someone who spent January in Barbados. David had been making polite conversation all evening, golf, property prices, the usual anesthetic, when during a lull he leaned over with his whiskey and said, "Your wife's something, Jack, quite the firecracker." Jack smiled. "She is. Saw her at the Clarington fundraiser last month. She and that Parker fellow were really going at it on the dance floor." David chuckled. "Very spirited." The smirk. That was the thing, not the words, the smirk. The little curl at the corner of David Holt's mouth that said, "I know something, and I know you know it too, and isn't it amusing that we're both pretending otherwise?" Jack felt something shift inside his chest. Not a crack, a click. Like a lock engaging. "I don't know what you mean," Jack said. No, of course not." David raised his glass. "She's a force of nature, that's all, lucky man." Jack finished the dinner. He shook hands. He took a cab home. He walked through the door of the Kensington flat at 10:30, and Sienna was on the sofa in silk pajamas, reading constituency briefings with her glasses on. She looked up. "How was dinner?" "Fine." That word again. "Sienna, I need to ask you something." "Okay. How many?" She took off her glasses, slowly, the way someone removes a mask. "How many what?" "Men, since we got married, how many?" The silence was its own answer. It lasted 4 seconds. Long enough for Jack to hear the fridge humming in the kitchen and the taxi pulling away outside and his own heartbeat thudding in his ears. "3, Sienna said. 3. "Yes." Jack waited for the anger. The white-hot fury he'd imagined in the hypothetical version of this conversation he'd run 1,000 times in his head. It didn't come. Instead, something colder arrived. A feeling like watching a building being demolished from very far away. All the structure, all the architecture of what he'd told himself this marriage was a real partnership with one unusual clause collapsed into dust. 3 men, in 2 years, while he'd been running at 5 a.m. and lying awake in the dark and telling himself, fine, fine, fine. Do I know any of them? Jack, do I know them? One, peripherally, the others, no. She set down her briefing papers. Her hands were steady, her voice was steady, everything about her was steady because this was a conversation she'd prepared for. It was discreet, it was careful, and it was within the terms of what we agreed. The terms? Yes, you sound like a lawyer. I'm being honest with you. Which is more than most people in my position would do. Jack looked at her. The silk pajamas. The reading glasses now folded on the cushion. The constituency briefings fanned across the sofa like a paper barricade. And he realized with a clarity that felt like stepping out of a burning building into cold air that he didn't know this woman. He knew her face and her voice and the shape of her body and the way she laughed, but the person underneath, the one making choices in rooms he'd never see, was a stranger. Okay, he said. Okay. I heard you 3 discreet within the terms. He picked up his jacket from the back of the chair. I'm going to bed. Jack, talk to me. I just did. He walked upstairs. He brushed his teeth. He lay down on his side of the bed, the bed that cost 8,000 pounds and felt like sleeping on a cloud and meant nothing, and stared at the wall. Sienna came up 20 minutes later. She lay beside him. She didn't touch him. They slept 3 feet apart. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in cohabitation without connection. They ate breakfast at the same table. They attended the same events. They slept in the same bed. But the space between them had turned solid, visible, architectural, load-bearing. Jack moved through the flat like a tenant in someone else's property, which technically he was. Sienna noticed. Of course she noticed. She was a politician. Reading rooms was her profession. She tried charm first. Small touches. A hand on his back in the kitchen, her foot against his under the table at a dinner party. Jack didn't flinch. He just didn't respond. His body was there. The rest of him had relocated. Then she tried conversation. "We need to talk about this," she said one evening. They were in the kitchen. Jack was cooking. Sienna was leaning against the island with a glass of wine, watching him the way she used to, attentive, warm, present. It would have worked 6 weeks ago. "About what?" "About whatever's happening. You haven't looked at me properly in 3 weeks. I look at you all the time. You look past me. There's a difference." Jack set down the knife, turned to face her. She was beautiful. She was always beautiful. Even now, in jeans and a loose jumper, no makeup, hair pulled back, she looked like a photograph that someone had spent hours lighting. It used to floor him. Now it just made him tired. "You told me 3 men," he said, "and I processed that, and what I found when I finished processing is that I don't feel the same way about you, about us, about any of this." "It was the agreement, Jack. You agreed. I know what I agreed. I'm not saying you broke a rule. I'm saying that knowing the rules and living inside them are 2 different things. I thought I could handle it. I can't." "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying the marriage is over. Emotionally, whatever we have now is logistics." Sienna set down her wine. Her expression shifted, the careful composure fracturing just slightly around the edges. "You don't mean that?" "I do. Jack, I love you. The other men, they're nothing. Physical, forgettable. You're the one I come home to. You're the one that's exactly the problem." His voice was quiet, not angry, exhausted. "You come home to me like I'm a house. A safe place to sleep between adventures. I don't want to be someone's base camp, Sienna. I want to be the whole expedition." She crossed the kitchen, stood close, put her hands on his chest, the same gesture from a dozen moments, the wine bar, the engagement, the night before the wedding, her signature move, the physical override. "Let me remind you," she whispered. "Let me remind you what we are." She leaned up to kiss him. Jack caught her wrists, gently but firmly. "No," one word, and the shock on Sienna's face, genuine, unfiltered, the expression of a woman who had never been refused this particular weapon, told him everything about the architecture of their relationship. She stepped back. Her eyes were wet. Not tears, not yet, but the shimmer of something she was fighting hard to keep inside. "So that's it, you just switch off?" "Maybe you haven't changed," Jack said, "but I have." The silence after that was brutal. Kitchen sounds, the extractor fan, a car alarm somewhere on the street, all the background noise of a life that was still happening while theirs was ending. "I want a divorce," Jack said. "You can't." "I can. The general election is in 7 months. If you leave now, if this becomes public, it destroys everything I've built. My career, my reputation, everything. That's not my problem. It is your problem because you work for my father's company. You live in my family's flat. Your entire professional identity was built on the back of this marriage, and if you blow it up now, you don't just hurt me, you hurt yourself." The truth of it landed like a punch, because she was right. Tom owned Redcliffe. Tom owned the flat. Tom, in every way that mattered, owned the scaffolding of Jack's life. Pull one beam and the whole structure folds. 7 months, Sienna said. Her voice had shifted, harder now, political. "Stay until after the election, attend the events, play the part, and then you can have your divorce and I won't contest a single thing." "And what do I get in the meantime?" "Your salary, your career, time to plan your exit." Jack looked at her, the woman he married. The woman he loved once with the kind of desperate, blinding intensity that only comes from not knowing any better. 7 months, he said, not a day more. Agreed. They didn't shake hands this time. There was nothing left to seal. Jack discovered the coast by accident. A wrong turn on the M3, a Saturday with nothing to fill, and suddenly the motorway gave way to B roads and then to a village. and then to a car park overlooking a stretch of English Channel that was gray and wild and violent in exactly the way Jack needed. He sat in his car for 20 minutes, watching the waves. Then he got out, walked to the beach, and stood in the wind until his face went numb and his head went quiet for the first time in months. He came back the next weekend, and the next. The third time he saw the surf school, a wooden shack near the car park with a hand-painted sign that read, "South Coast Surf Beginners Welcome, Experts Tolerated." Jack had never surfed. He'd never expressed interest in surfing, but something about the stupidity of it, a 27-year-old corporate director in a wetsuit, falling off a board in freezing English water, appealed to the part of him that was sick of doing things that made sense. He signed up. The instructor was a retired PE teacher named Graham, who had the patience of a saint and the sunburn of a man who'd given up on Factor 50. The class was 6 people. Jack, 2 teenage boys who spent more time pushing each other off their boards than standing on them, a retired nurse named Helen who was determined to tick off her bucket list, a man called Derek who appeared to be in a custody-related midlife crisis, and a woman named Jennifer Quinn, 26. Blonde hair bleached further by salt water. Brown skin from actual sunlight, not a bottle. A wetsuit that had seen better days and a smile that hadn't. She was terrible at surfing. Gloriously, unashamedly terrible. She fell off her board with the frequency of someone who declared war on gravity, and every time she surfaced sputtering, salt water dripping from her nose, seaweed stuck to her shoulders, she laughed. Not the polished, careful laugh of someone managing an impression. A real one, loud from somewhere deep. Jack, who was also terrible, found himself laughing too. After the third lesson, they ended up at a fish and chip shop on the seafront. Plastic chairs, paper-wrapped cod, seagulls circling like feathered muggers. "What do you do?" Jen asked. Direct, no preamble. "Construction, corporate side." "It's very boring." "Good boring or bad boring? Is there a difference?" "Good boring pays the bills and you forget about it at 5 o'clock. Bad boring eats your soul and you think about it in the shower." "Shower kind." "Thought so, you've got shower thinker eyes." She stole one of his chips. "I'm a veterinary nurse, which is good boring except when a Labrador vomits on your shoes." Jack laughed, a genuine, involuntary, surprised-by-itself laugh. The kind he hadn't heard come out of his own mouth in a very long time. They talked, not about politics or strategy or constituencies or anything that required a second meaning beneath the first. They talked about surfing and dogs and terrible films and whether fish and chips tasted better at the coast or if it was just the salt air tricking your brain. "So what's the real story?" Jen said, after the chips were gone and the seagulls had given up. "You drive here every weekend from London to fall off a surfboard. That's not a hobby, that's an escape plan." Jack looked at the sea. The gray, restless, honest sea. "I'm married," he said. "It's complicated. Complicated good or complicated bad? Complicated ending." Jen nodded. She didn't flinch. She didn't probe. She didn't offer advice or judgment or the performative sympathy of someone who wants the gossip. "My last relationship ended because he wanted me to stop being a vegetarian," she said. "He said my cooking smelled like a garden center, so I planted a row of cabbages in his front garden and moved out." "You did not." "Full-sized cabbages, Jack. They grew beautifully. His neighbors loved them." He was laughing again, properly. The muscles in his face ached with it like they'd been in storage. Weeks passed. Saturdays became their anchor. Surf in the morning, fish and chips after, sometimes a walk along the cliff path if the weather held. Jen didn't ask about Sienna. Jack volunteered bits and pieces. The marriage was ending. He was staying for professional reasons. It was temporary and Jen absorbed them without drama. She was, Jack realized, the first person in years who wanted nothing from him. No image, no arrangement. No strategic value. She just liked his company and his bad surfing and the fact that he laughed at her jokes. One Saturday in late August, the surf was flat. They walked the beach instead. The sun was low and the light was doing that golden thing that makes the English coast look like it belongs in a different country. Jen was talking about a terrier she'd treated that morning, something about an X-ray and a swallowed toy car, and Jack wasn't really listening to the words. He was listening to her voice. The warmth of it, the ease. She stopped walking, turned to him. "You're staring." "Sorry, don't be sorry, just tell me why." "Because you're the most uncomplicated person I've ever met." And I mean that as the highest possible compliment. Jen looked at him. The wind pushed her hair across her face. She didn't fix it. I'm going to kiss you now, she said. And if that's a problem, you should say so in the next 3 seconds. Jack said nothing. She kissed him, soft, brief, tasting like salt and the lip balm she was always reapplying. It was the smallest, simplest, least dramatic kiss of his adult life. It was the cleanest thing he'd felt in years. The following Saturday, Jen wasn't at surf class. Jack checked his phone. No messages. He texted her on Thursday a photo of a particularly ugly dog he'd seen outside a coffee shop, captioned "Your next patient," and the blue ticks showed delivered but not read. He figured she was busy, a late shift, a family thing, life. The Saturday after that, she wasn't there either. Graham, the instructor, shrugged when Jack asked. Haven't heard from her, people drop in and out. That's the coast. Jack drove to her house after the lesson. Jen lived in a cottage about a mile from the beach, small, white-walled, a bicycle leaning against the fence and a window box of herbs that she'd pointed out proudly on the one occasion he'd dropped her home. The herbs were wilting. The bicycle was gone. He knocked. Nothing. He knocked again, harder, and the door of the neighboring house opened. A woman in her 60s, holding a watering can, peered over the fence. Looking for Jennifer. Yeah, is she around? Gone, love, about 10 days ago, very sudden. Some men came to help her move. She said she'd been offered a job abroad, veterinary work, somewhere tropical. Abroad? Where abroad? She didn't say exactly. Somewhere in Asia, I think. Indonesia, Bali. She seemed in a rush. Didn't even cancel the milk. Jack stood on the doorstep, the wilting herbs, the absent bicycle, the milk bottles stacked in the porch uncollected. Did she seem okay when she left? The neighbor hesitated, a tiny pause, but Jack caught it. She seemed fine, the woman said, carefully. A bit quiet, maybe. Those men who helped her move were very efficient, professional types. Not her usual crowd. Professional types. Smart clothes, black car, you know the sort. Jack knew the sort. He drove back to London with his hands tight on the wheel and his mind running calculations he didn't want to finish. Professional types, black car, sudden departure, no goodbye. He thought about Tom Fremont, the man who'd arranged Jack's career with a single phone call. The man who'd been married for 32 years by controlling every variable. The man whose daughter was 7 months from a general election and whose son-in-law had been spending every Saturday at the coast with a blonde veterinary nurse. Jack had no proof, no evidence, no smoking gun. Just a missing woman and a row of dying herbs and the cold, creeping certainty that the family he'd married into was capable of things he hadn't let himself imagine. He picked up his phone, dialed Sienna. Where's Jen? A pause. Who? Don't do that. Don't play that game with me. Jennifer Quinn, the woman I've been seeing at the coast. Where is she? Jack, I have no idea what you're... She's gone. Vanished. No warning, no message. Professional movers. Black car. Does any of this sound familiar? Does any of this sound like your father's handwriting? Another pause, longer this time. I don't know what you're talking about, Sienna said. Her voice was level, parliamentary. The voice she used when journalists asked about expenses. If your friend has moved away, that's her choice. People move. People don't disappear, Sienna, not without saying goodbye, not unless someone makes them. You're being paranoid. Am I? Yes, and frankly, the fact that you've been spending your weekends with another woman while we're still married isn't exactly. Don't turn this into my fault. We agreed, both directions. I have to go. I have a committee hearing in 20 minutes. The line went dead. Jack sat in his car in the Kensington parking garage, engine off in the concrete dark, and felt something he hadn't felt since the night of the university ball. Powerless. The Whitmore Gala was the kind of event where politics and money slow danced together and pretended they'd never met. Held annually at a hotel in Mayfair, chandeliers the size of small boats, enough marble to build a second Parthenon. A string quartet playing something inoffensive near the entrance, it was the pre-election event of the season. Every MP, every donor, every strategist, every journalist with the right invitation packed into a ballroom that smelled like expensive perfume and quiet desperation. Jack arrived at 8, black tie, hair cut that morning, shoes polished to a military standard. He looked by any measure like a man in control. Underneath, he was running on 4 hours of sleep and the grim determination of someone counting down to their own liberation. 4 months left, 17 weeks, 119 days. Sienna was already there. She was in red. A deliberate choice. Red photographed well. Red said power. Red said notice me. Her hair was pinned up, exposing the line of her neck, and she was surrounded by a semicircle of donors who were laughing at something she'd said, while their wives stood slightly behind them, smiling with varying degrees of sincerity. She saw Jack. Her expression adjusted warmth, affection, the practiced glow of a woman greeting the love of her life. She crossed the room and kissed his cheek. "You look wonderful," she said. "You look like a campaign poster." "Thank you." It wasn't a compliment. She held his arm. They circulated. Jack shook hands. He made small talk. He ate canapes that cost more per bite than a meal at Jen's fish and chip shop and tasted like nothing. He scanned the room out of habit. Donors. MPs. A cabinet minister telling an anecdote that had been polished so many times it had lost all texture. Margaret in navy, standing near the bar with the particular stillness of a woman who had attended 3 decades of these events and no longer bothered pretending they were interesting. Tom, holding court near the terrace doors, whiskey in hand, commanding a cluster of businessmen. And then Jack saw him. William Parker, 31. Labour MP for somewhere in the Midlands, recently defected to Sienna's party in a move that had dominated the news cycle for a week. Young, sharp-jawed, the kind of handsome that comes with its own gravitational pull. He was standing by the bar, and he was looking at Sienna with the expression of a man who knew exactly what was underneath the red dress. Jack recognized the look. He'd worn it himself once. 20 minutes later, the dancing started. Jack was talking to a constituency chairman about planning regulations, the conversational equivalent of chewing cardboard, when he glanced toward the floor. Sienna was dancing with William Parker. Not the polite, arm's-length waltz of 2 colleagues. Close, his hand on the small of her back. Her head tilted toward his, laughing at something whispered. The kind of dancing that made the people watching either look away or lean in. People were watching. Jack could feel it. The same prickle he'd felt at the university ball a lifetime ago. Eyes, whispers, the delicate social thrill of witnessing someone else's humiliation in real time. Jack set down his drink. He crossed the ballroom floor. He reached the dancing couple. He tapped William Parker on the shoulder lightly, the way you'd tap someone in a queue. "Mind if I cut in?" William looked at him, assessed, decided Jack wasn't worth a scene. "Of course," William said, smooth, polished. He stepped back, gave Sienna a smile that lingered 1 beat too long, and melted into the crowd. Jack took Sienna's hand. They danced. The string quartet had moved into something slower. Around them, other couples swayed, oblivious or pretending to be. "What are you doing?" Sienna whispered. "Dancing with my wife, that's still allowed, isn't it? You're making a scene." "I'm making a scene?" You were practically horizontal with him, in a room full of journalists. 4 months before an election. "William is a colleague. We were networking." "You were networking with your hips." Sienna's grip on his shoulder tightened. "Keep your voice down." "Why? Afraid people might hear something they haven't already guessed." Jack leaned in, close enough that anyone watching would think he was whispering something romantic. "You seem to have forgotten the rules of your own stupid game, Sienna. Discreet. That was the word. Not dancing with your latest conquest in front of 200 people who'd love nothing more than to watch you crash and burn." "He's not my—" "Don't lie to me. Not tonight. I can smell his cologne on you, and we've been dancing for 30 seconds. Sienna's expression locked. The politician's mask, the face she wore when a camera caught her off guard. "You need to get through these next 4 months, Jack said. "And I agreed to help you do that, but if you keep this up, the public performances, the William Parkers, the need to have every man in every room looking at you, I won't wait for the election. I'll walk out tonight. And I'll make sure every journalist in this building knows why." The music ended. They stopped dancing. Jack released her hand. "Smile for the room," he said. "That's what you're good at." He turned and walked toward the bar. Behind him, Sienna stood alone on the dance floor for exactly 2 seconds before someone else approached her with a handshake and a talking point. She smiled. Of course she smiled. Across the room, Margaret Fremont watched the entire exchange from her position near the bar. She said nothing. She sipped her water, and she observed. The meeting was Tom's idea. Of course it was, 3 days after the gala, a Sunday morning. The Fremont family office in Belgravia, not the Hampshire house, not the Kensington flat, but the neutral ground where Tom conducted business that required witnesses and hard surfaces. 3rd floor of a Georgian terrace, a conference table that seated 12. Blinds drawn, coffee laid out by someone who'd been told to disappear afterward. Jack arrived first, deliberately. He wanted to be seated, settled, in control of the room before anyone else walked in. He chose the chair at the far end of the table, facing the door. He wore jeans and a white shirt, no suit, no costume. Margaret came next, navy dress, pearl earrings. She nodded at Jack, sat 2 chairs to his left, and poured herself a glass of water. She didn't speak. But her posture was different from every other time he'd seen her, stiffer, more deliberate, as if she'd made a decision and was now just waiting for the right moment to announce it. Sienna arrived with Tom. They came in together, which told Jack everything about how the morning had been choreographed. Sienna was in black, no makeup. She looked tired in a way that expensive skincare couldn't hide the tiredness that lives behind the eyes, in the jaw, in the slight tremor of a hand reaching for a coffee cup. Tom sat at the head of the table. Obviously, he opened a leather folder, glanced at the contents, closed it again. A prop. The man didn't need notes. "We're here to discuss the situation," Tom said, calmly, rationally. "Like adults." "Where's William?" Jack said. The room went still. "I'm sorry," Tom said. "William Parker, he should be here since he's apparently part of this family now, or at least part of my wife. I think he deserves a seat at the table." Sienna's head snapped toward him. "Jack, don't. I invited him," Jack said. "Last night, sent a message through his constituency office. Told him it was regarding a personal matter connected to Sienna Fremont. He'll be here." Tom's expression didn't change. But something shifted behind his eyes, the recalculation of a man who'd walked into a room expecting to run the meeting and just discovered someone had rewritten the agenda. The buzzer rang 7 minutes later. William Parker entered the conference room the way he entered everything, with the confident stride of a man who'd been told his entire life that rooms were lucky to have him. 31, dark suit, clean jaw, the kind of politician who'd been groomed for the role since prep school. But today, the confidence had a crack in it. His eyes moved fast, scanning the room, registering Tom, Sienna, Margaret, landing on Jack. "What's this about?" William said. He didn't sit. "Sit down, William," Jack said, pleasantly, the way you'd offer someone a drink. William looked at Sienna. She looked at the table. He sat. "Right," Jack said. "Since we're all here and since Tom wanted a rational conversation, let's have one." He turned to William. "How long have you been sleeping with my wife?" The words detonated across the table like a grenade, with the pin pulled out very slowly. William opened his mouth, closed it, looked at Sienna again. She was gripping her coffee cup with both hands, eyes fixed on its surface, studying it like it contained the answers to something. "I don't think that's 3 months." Jack continued. 4, since the defection, was that part of the deal? Switch parties, get the candidate as a bonus." "That's offensive," William said. His voice had found its footing, the parliamentary voice, measured, authoritative, completely hollow. "Sienna and I are colleagues. Whatever you think you've seen, I've seen you with your hand on my wife's back at the Whitmore Gala. I've seen you whispering in her ear while 200 people pretended not to watch, and I've had a hedge fund manager make a joke about it to my face over whiskey." Jack leaned forward. "So let's skip the part where you deny it and get to the part that matters." "Jack," Sienna started. "Not yet." He kept his eyes on William. "You're married, aren't you, William?" The crack widened. "My personal life isn't married. 2 kids, a girl and a boy. Your wife's name is Charlotte. She runs a children's literacy charity in Warwickshire. There's a lovely photo of the 4 of you on your constituency website. Dog included, a spaniel, I think." William said nothing. His jaw was clenched so tight that the muscle twitched visibly. "So here's how this goes," Jack said. His voice was calm, almost conversational, the calmness of someone who has nothing left to lose. "You can continue this affair with my wife, that's your choice. But if you do, I will make sure Charlotte finds out, not through gossip, not through a newspaper, from me personally. I'll drive to Warwickshire myself. And then I'll hold a press conference as the husband of an MP and the son-in-law of Tom Fremont, and I'll explain, in detail, how 2 members of the same party managed to conduct an affair while both were supposed to be representing family values to their constituencies." The room was silent. Tom's face was unreadable. Margaret sipped her water. William Parker looked at Sienna. Really looked at her, and what Jack saw in that look was not love, not loyalty, not even lust. It was calculation, the rapid, cold arithmetic of a man weighing his career against his desires. "Sienna," William said, I think we need to don't, Sienna whispered. This isn't sustainable. You understand that. If this becomes public, we both, don't you dare. I'm sorry, William stood. Straightened his jacket. The politician's reflex fixed the exterior even as the interior collapses. I have to think about my family, about my seat. I can't be involved in this. He looked at Jack, not with anger, with something worse, relief. Jack had given him the excuse he needed to walk away without looking like the one who quit. I'll see myself out, William said, and he left. The door closed behind him with the soft, expensive click of quality hardware. Sienna sat very still for a long time. The coffee cup was still in her hands. Her knuckles were white. He was never going to stay, Jack said, gently, not cruelly. They never do, not the Williams, not the Richards. The men you choose as lovers are always the men who will leave when it costs them something. Stop. Because you don't pick men who love you, you pick men who want you. And those aren't the same thing, Sienna. They've never been the same thing. Sienna looked up. Her eyes were dry, but the expression on her face was something Jack had never seen before, not anger, not shame, not political composure. It was recognition. The dawning, terrible understanding of a pattern she'd been running since university, laid bare under conference room lighting. Tom cleared his throat. Well, now that the theatrics are over, we're not done, Jack said. Not even close. Tom Fremont was not a man who panicked. He was a man who recalculated. William Parker was gone. The door had barely closed before Tom was already reshaping the board, adjusting the pieces, finding the angle that kept everything standing. Jack, Tom said. His voice was steady, warm, even, the voice of a man about to make you an offer so generous you'd feel ungrateful for refusing it. I understand you're angry. You have every right to be. I'm not angry, Tom. I'm finished. Let's not be hasty. Tom opened the leather folder. This time he actually read from it. I've had my solicitor prepare a proposal, a generous one. I don't want a proposal. £1 million. Tom said it the way he said everything, as fact, as gravity. Transferred to an account in your name, liquid, no conditions on how you spend it. Plus continued employment at Redcliffe at your current level for a minimum of 5 years with a guaranteed directorship within 3. Jack stared at him. In exchange, Tom continued, you remain married to Sienna for 1 additional year, through the general election. Through the first 6 months of her next term, you attend the events, you maintain the image. After that, a quiet, amicable divorce. No contest, you keep the Cotswolds property, you walk away wealthy and free. £1 million. And the career, and the property, and the knowledge that you helped a woman you once loved achieve something extraordinary. Jack almost laughed. Not at the number was obscene. And the part of him that remembered the Clapham flat, and the damp and the meal prep chicken, felt its pull like a physical force. He almost laughed because after everything, the fake dating, the fake engagement, the negotiation in this very family study, the open marriage, the affairs, the gala, the whole rotten, glittering architecture of this life, Tom Fremont's solution was still the same. Write a check. Buy the silence. Control the variable. You really think everything has a price, Jack said. Everything does. The only question is whether the price is honest. Enough! The word didn't come from Jack. It came from Margaret. She'd been sitting so quietly, so still, for so long that Jack had almost forgotten she was there. The silent observer. The pearl earrings and the water glass and the 32 years of sitting in rooms exactly like this one, while her husband conducted the business of controlling everyone around him. But now she was standing. And her voice, the voice Jack had only ever heard murmur polite things at dinner tables and charity events, filled the room like a window being thrown open in a sealed building. Enough, Tom. Tom turned to his wife with the expression of a man who just heard his furniture speak. Margaret, no, I have sat in this chair and I have listened and I have watched you do what you always do. Buy it, fix it, manage it, like people are planning applications. Her voice was shaking, not with weakness, with decades of compressed force finally finding an exit. This boy came into our family with nothing but good intentions, and you turned him into a prop, just like you turned me into one. Margaret, this is not the time. It is exactly the time, because if I don't say it now in front of witnesses, I'll spend another 30 years swallowing it. She looked at Sienna. I love you. You know I love you. But what you've done to this man is what your father did to me, and I will not sit here and watch the cycle repeat. Sienna's face crumpled. The composure, the political mask, the armor she'd worn through William's departure, all of it collapsed. "Mum, your father has kept mistresses for 23 years. Margaret said it without flinching. Not the civilized arrangement he described to Jack, not the mutual agreement between equals. He did what he wanted, and I was told to be grateful for the lifestyle, and I was, for a long time, because I didn't know what else to be." Tom was very still. The leather folder sat untouched on the table. "But I am done," Margaret said. "I am leaving you, Tom. I've already spoken to a solicitor." "My own solicitor, not the family one, mine." "Margaret, you're being emotional. I am being clear. For the first time in 32 years, I am being perfectly, completely clear." She turned to Jack. Her eyes were bright, fierce, the eyes of a woman who'd spent 3 decades watching and had finally decided to act. "There's something you need to know," Margaret said, "about the girl, Jennifer." Jack's chest tightened. "Margaret, don't," Tom said sharply, the first crack in his composure. "Your father-in-law had her removed." Margaret's voice was steady now. The shaking was gone. "He hired people, the same security consultants he uses for corporate matters. They visited her at home. They explained that her involvement with a married man connected to a political family could result in difficulties, media exposure, professional consequences. They offered her money to leave the country quickly and quietly." "How much?" Jack's voice was barely audible. "I don't know the amount. But I know it was accompanied by a strong suggestion that staying in England would become very unpleasant." Jack looked at Tom, the silver hair, the steady hands, the man who'd sat across from him in the Hampshire study and talked about partnership and strategic alliance and thinking bigger. "Where is she?" Jack said. Tom said nothing. "Tom," Margaret's voice was a blade. "Tell him." "Indonesia," Tom said, quietly, stripped of authority for the first time. "Lombok, she went to Lombok." Jack stood up. The chair scraped against the hardwood floor. The sound was sharp and final. "I'm done," he said, "with the marriage, with the company, with this family." He walked to the door, stopped, turned back to Margaret. "Thank you," he said, "for telling the truth." Margaret nodded. She picked up her handbag from the back of the chair, straightened her pearls, and she walked out of the conference room with Jack, leaving Tom and Sienna sitting at a table designed for 12 in a room that had never felt emptier. In the hallway, Margaret put her hand on Jack's arm. The same light, confident touch her daughter had used the night of the university ball. The same gesture. But from a different woman, one who meant it. "She loved you," Margaret said. "In her way, it just wasn't a way that was good enough." "I know. Go find the girl, Jack." The lift arrived. They stepped in together. The doors closed. Behind them, in the conference room, Sienna Fremont sat alone at the table and stared at her cold coffee and did not cry. Not yet. 4 days passed. Jack spent them in a hotel in Bloomsbury, mid-range. Anonymous, the kind of place where businessmen with canceled flights stare at room service menus. He didn't go to the Kensington flat. He didn't go to Redcliffe. He turned off his phone for 48 hours and let the silence do what silence does when you've been living inside noise for too long. On the 3rd day, he turned the phone back on. 112 messages, 14 from George Benson at Redcliffe asking where he was, 6 from Marcus, 3 from Priya, 1 from his mother who had somehow already sensed something was wrong because mothers are built with sonar, nothing from Tom, 1 from Sienna, sent the previous evening, "I need to see you, not to argue, please." He agreed to meet her, not at the flat, not at the family office, at a cafe in Marylebone's small public neutral. The kind of place where neither of them had any history. She was already there when he arrived, corner table, no makeup, hair pulled back, wearing a gray jumper and jeans. She looked younger without the armor, smaller. Like a sketch of the woman he'd married with all the color drained out. "You look terrible," Jack said, sitting down. "I haven't slept." She wrapped her hands around a mug of tea. "I've withdrawn from the election." Jack blinked. Of all the things he'd expected her to say, that wasn't in the first 20. "When?" "Yesterday," called the party chairman. Told him personal circumstances made it impossible to continue. She almost smiled. He was understanding, in the way that people are understanding when they're already planning your replacement. "What about the scandal, the press?" "There won't be one. William's keeping quiet because he has more to lose than I do. And my father," she paused, took a breath. "My father is dealing with my mother's solicitor and doesn't have the bandwidth to manage my career and his marriage simultaneously. Turns out even Tom Fremont has a limit." Jack ordered a coffee. The waitress was young, cheerful, completely unaware that the two people at the corner table were dismantling a life. "I owe you an apology," Sienna said. "A real one, not the political kind. Not the kind where I explain my behavior so it sounds reasonable. A real one." "Okay. I used you from the very beginning. At university, I used you as a cover. In London, I used you as a prop. And when I married you, I used you as a foundation for something I was building for myself. I told myself I loved you, and I did, Jack. I did love you, but the love was never the point. The point was always what you gave me: stability, image, a good man standing next to me so I could do whatever I wanted behind him." She said it without crying, without performing. Just the flat, exhausted honesty of someone who had finally run out of better versions of the truth. "I didn't know how to love someone without an arrangement," she continued. "My parents' marriage was an arrangement. Every relationship I've ever seen was an arrangement. I thought that was just how it worked, that you find someone useful and you call it love because the word makes it sound better. And the other men were exactly what you said at the conference table: not political necessity, not physical need, ego, proof that I could have anything I wanted without consequences." She looked at him. "You were right about the Richards and the Williams. I chose men who'd leave because if they left, it meant I never had to be vulnerable. You were the only one who stayed, and I punished you for it." Jack sat with that. He turned his coffee cup slowly on the saucer. "I know about Jen," he said. "Your mother told me." Sienna closed her eyes. "I know she did. Did you know?" "About what your father did." A long silence. The cafe hummed around them, cutlery, conversation, a child laughing at a table by the window. "Not the details," Sienna said. "I knew he'd handled it. I didn't ask how. I didn't want to know how." She opened her eyes. "Which is the same thing as knowing, isn't it?" "Yes. I'm sorry for Jen, for all of it. She didn't deserve to be collateral in my family's damage." "No, she didn't." Sienna reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She slid it across the table. "Her address in Lombok. My mother got it from my father's security people." She paused. "Apparently she's working at a surf school near a village called Kuta, not the Bali one, the Lombok one." Jack took the paper. Unfolded it, an address, a village name, a phone number. "Why are you giving me this?" "Because you should go, because she made you happy in a way I never could, and because—" Sienna's voice caught for the first time, a small fracture in the steadiness. "Because if I can't be the person who loves you properly, the least I can do is point you toward someone who can." Jack looked at the paper. Then at Sienna. "I'm resigning from Redcliffe," he said. "Tomorrow. You don't have to do that. The job is yours. You earned it. The job was your father's. The interview was your father's. The salary, the office, the title, all of it was scaffolding, and I need to know I can stand without it. You can. You always could. That was the thing I never told you, Jack. You didn't need us. Any of us, you just thought you did." They sat for a while longer, not as husband and wife, not as exes, as two people who'd been through something together that neither of them would ever fully explain to anyone else. At the door, Sienna stopped him. "For what it's worth," she said, "I did love you. I know you might not believe that. And I know the way I loved you was selfish and conditional and never enough. But it was real. In its own broken way, it was real." Jack looked at her, the turquoise eyes, the face he'd been staring at since a university ball a lifetime ago. The woman who'd rescued him and ruined him and taught him, through years of painful education, the difference between being wanted and being loved. "I know," he said. "Goodbye, Sienna. Goodbye, Jack." He walked out into Marylebone. The air was cold, November. The trees were bare and the sky was the color of old pewter, and London looked exactly like it always looked at the end of something gray, indifferent, already moving on. Jack pulled out his phone. Googled flights to Lombok. There was one leaving Heathrow tomorrow evening. A connection through Singapore. 22 hours of travel to get to a woman he'd known for a handful of Saturdays on an English beach. He booked it. Then he called his mother. "Mum, I'm going to Indonesia." A pause. "Is everything all right?" "Not yet, but I think it's about to be."